Okay, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for Volcanoes of the Cascades. My name is Jamie Dawson. I'm the Ochoco Mountains Coordinator for Oregon Wild, and I'm based here in our Bend office. For those of you who might be new to Oregon Wild, we are a statewide environmental conservation organization dedicated to protecting Oregon's wildlands, wildlife, and waters as an enduring legacy for all Oregonians. And this is one of the reasons why we're making this presentation available tonight, is because volcanoes are one of the many beautiful natural features that we have here in Oregon. So I'm very excited for this program tonight. We're going to be joined by my friend Hal Wershow, who is an assistant professor of geology here in Bend at Central Oregon Community College. He has a lot of experience with volcanoes, both in the Northwest and in Hawaii. And he knows his stuff. So he actually teaches the local course here on Volcanoes of the Cascades. So I'm really grateful that he's willing to share his wonderful knowledge with all of us tonight online. After Hal's presentation, I'll give a short update on what Oregon Wild is working on public lands wise, volcano related and otherwise. And then we'll roll straight into Q&A. So throughout the presentation, you can ask questions at any point, and if you look on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a little kind of a question mark and a thought bubble, and if you click that, it'll open up the questions panel. You can just type your questions in there, and then I'll be digging through those and pitching as many of those to Hal as possible at the end of the presentation, so be sure to stick around for that part. A video of this webcast is going to be emailed out tomorrow, and it'll also be posted on our website, oregonwild.org, in the wild blog section. If your screen suddenly freezes, or you can't hear Hal for some reason, or the slide isn't working, just try closing the whole thing completely and then go back to your email, click that link that you clicked to get here just now, and then reopen it, and that should fix the problem. But you're also welcome to send me an email, respond to that email, and let me know if there's some problem and I can try and help you out. Many people bought raffle tickets tonight. Thank you so much. That means a lot to us. We appreciate the support. It helps us make events like this possible and also directly contributes to the conservation work that we're doing every day. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Some people were buying them right as they were coming in just in the last few minutes. So we're going to be emailing the raffle winners tomorrow. Thanks again for that. And of course, next week's presentation, we're still doing them for the foreseeable future, and the topic is advocating for endangered species and imperiled landscapes. So if you're interested in how you can use your voice to advocate for wildlife and wild places that can't advocate for themselves, we hope you'll join us for that webcast. Sign-ups are on oregonwild.org right now, and there will also be a link in the follow-up email. So without further delay, please join me in welcoming Hal. Thank you, Hal.
Awesome, the applause is deafening. So much I can't hear it. Alrighty, folks, let's get rolling as we negotiate our virtual world. So yeah, as Jamie said, my name's Hal Wershow, teach geology at Central Oregon Community College, and I am absolutely blessed to have this as my teaching backyard. So let's roll into these things. There's a few questions we want to roll through tonight. Number one, this is kind of what Jamie came to me with. People want to know, is that big pile of rocks a volcano? We will learn that tonight. And to really answer that question, of course, we need to know, how do we know if it's a volcano? So we'll address that as well. We'll talk about why there are volcanoes here, big picture stuff. And finally, what everybody wants to know, are these things gonna go volcanic on us? By which, of course, I mean erupt. Let's jump into this. So, got a little game to play with you guys. If you ever take a class from me, you'll find that this is kind of how I teach. I ask you guys questions. So I'm going to give you just a few seconds. Maybe you can chat about this with the people who you're hanging out with right now while you're watching it, because obviously I can't hear you. But I'll be quiet for a little bit and let you think. Is this a volcano? What's your evidence? Okay, that awkward silence is hopefully you thinking. Now here's the answer. It is indeed a volcano. It's what we call a composite volcano. You might have recognized it as Mount Hood. This photograph, by the way, was by a guy named John Skurlock, who does amazing aerial photography of every single glacier in the Cascades. And some of your evidence that this is a volcano, besides the fact that it's tall and pointy, you can see volcanic layers on the structure of this beast. I'm going to try to highlight those. These right here are layers of rocks, and one of your clues that they're volcanic layers is they're all tilted downhill, like lava flowed down the flanks of this volcano, as opposed to horizontal sedimentary layers. Your other big clue is the bizarre coloration in these rocks. All the yellows and oranges and purples, that's what we call hydrothermal alteration. And basically, these volcanoes constantly have hot fluids that are moving through the rocks and altering them and creating these bizarre colors. As we're going to learn later, that also kind of physically undermines them. It rots the rock and turns it into very weak, cruddy rock. So this is a volcano. It's a composite. It's Mount Hood. We've got lots of them all up and down the Cascades. Let's go to the next one. Oh, sorry, just a moment. There we go. So we're pointing at the little knob at the top of this image. Is it a volcano? Take a few seconds and think about that. The answer, of course, is yes, it is also a volcano. This is a different type of volcano. This is what we call a shield volcano. Shield volcanoes, you might know them from Hawaii. They're basically made of lots and lots and lots of lava flows. Note the foreground here, it's all lava flows. This is Belknap Crater. Anyways, Belknap Volcano is what a geologist would call it. This is your view from somewhere near the Mackenzie Pass Highway by the D. Wright Observatory. So different type of volcano, shield volcano, mostly lava flows. In contrast, backing up, our composite cones are called that because they're made of a variety of things like ash falls and lava flows. They're a composite of different volcanic eruptions. Okay, so we got composites, we got shields. Is this a volcano? Again, what's your evidence if it is? And maybe at this point you can venture a guess as to what type of volcano it is. So this is also a shield volcano. The reason I included this is Mount Washington, is it looks like one of these composite cones. It's tall and pointy. Turns out that tall and pointy is not actually a very good way of deciding that something is a volcano. These are the same types of volcanoes. They look totally different. What's the difference? Belknap is a few thousand years old and has not been glaciated. Mount Washington, I don't remember the exact age, is at least a few 100,000 years old and has undergone multiple cycles of glacial erosion during the last few ice ages. So the perimeter that I'm showing here is hypothetically what it used to look like. All we really have left is the core of the ancient shield volcano. The rest has been eroded. All right, next one up. Is it a volcano? So this is indeed a volcano. You guys are kind of on to me at this point. It's something called a cinder cone. And there's a few interesting clues that it is a volcano. For starters, there's a lava flow coming out of the side of it. That's pretty cool. This is the 7,000, sorry, I'm getting my dates wrong. It's approximately 7,000 years old. This is Lava Butte at Lava Lands. And this is a lava flow that spewed out of the side of the cinder cone after the cinder cone was kind of in its waning phases of its eruption. Other clues, there's a small crater at the top and it's very red. That's all cinder, which we're going to learn about in a little bit. This image in the top right is what we call a LiDAR image. It's basically stripping the landscape of any vegetation so we can see what it actually looks like. What I love about this is one, cinder cones show up like a sore thumb on LiDAR. They just pop right out of the ground. And this is an example where the shape really does tell us that it's a volcano. So whether you're looking from the side, like in the photograph, or from up above on the LiDAR, like in the top right, this is your classic cinder cone. They look like cones with little dimples at the top. And also you can see the flowing lava coming out of this. There's all these flowy textures in it, which look just like maple syrup or molasses or something like that. So pretty cool example of a cinder cone. especially in Central Oregon where I'm located. These are incredibly common. There's literally hundreds of them. All right, next up, what do we got? Is this a volcano? So of all the images I posted, this one's probably the most iconic. This is, of course, Crater Lake. Crater actually is a misnomer. This is a caldera. A crater is simply a small hole in the ground. A caldera implies that there is a catastrophic volcanic eruption such that the entire volcano collapsed in on itself. If you think of a volcano as something like this, that's a decent mental model, but what you really need to think of is underneath the volcano is a large magma chamber. Magma chamber is some large body of magma underneath, and if that all explodes out in a giant eruption, let's say 7,700 years ago when Mount Mazama went catastrophically volcanic, well, now you have an empty cone, a cone with nothing supporting it, and it's going to collapse down on itself. Think of a trap door. There's nothing underneath it, everything collapses down, and what you're left with is a giant caldera like Crater Lake. So it's entirely volcanic rock. Whether you call it a volcano today is somewhat a matter of debate. Most people would call it a volcano today. Worth noting, in the middle, Wizard Island, why, that's a cinder cone. So we can have volcanoes growing inside volcanoes. Pretty cool. All right, so we've gone through our major volcanoes in this region. And maybe at this point you're like, well, isn't everything here a volcano? Well, actually, if you look at this image, I'll talk through all these mountains and you'll realize that literally every single prominence in this photograph, we're looking north, is a volcano. Let's start from the south and work our way north. South, this is Quoll Butte. If you ski on Mount Bachelor and you look to the south, it's the Cinder Cone directly to the south. This is Mount Bachelor, Sparks Lake to the left, Tumalo Mountain to the right, Broken Top directly to the north. Why, that's another volcano. Ditto Tumalo, by the way. Ditto Mount Bachelor, it's a shield volcano. Broken Top's an extinct composite cone. Here's the Three Sisters. I think that's south right there. There's middle, there's north. They're all composite cones as well. Moving north from there, this is Black Crater, I believe. That's, I think, a shield volcano. Over here is Belknap Crater. We already saw that, another shield volcano. There's Mount Washington, another shield volcano. Three Finger Jack, I'm actually not sure off the top of my head. Over to the right, that's Black Butte, a very large cinder cone. Here's Mount Jefferson, another composite cone. There's Mount Hood, a composite cone. There's Mount Adams, an enormous composite cone. And there's a hint of Mount Rainier behind Mount Hood, but I'm not convinced. Anyways, what I want you to take away right now is there's a heck of a lot of volcanoes here in Oregon. So before we jump into why there's volcanoes, let's review how we know it. So sometimes the shape helps us with the cinder cones, but a lot of times it doesn't. So if you guys want to learn how the geologists do it, you got to look at the rocks. Let's talk about volcanic rocks. So I'm going to go over the three most common types of volcanic rocks that we find in Oregon. There's lots more. I'm going to try to keep it simple. First of all, we got this lovely name, tuff. It's created by pyroclastic flows, which are like the most deadly thing ever. Think of what destroyed the good folks of Pompeii back when Vesuvius erupted in like 79 Common Era. Anyways, I'm getting off topic. This is tuff. How do you know it's tuff? It's a volcanic rock made of chunks of other rocks. Hopefully you can see there's large chunks inside it. And specifically, one of those chunks is pumice. This guy right here is pumice. You would know that if you're standing next to it because you could literally take your finger and dig your thumbnail into it and it would scrape away. Pumice is soft. So if you find a rock that's made of lots of other rocks and you can just scrape it away with your thumb, you're looking at tuff. You should know tuff well from Smith Rock. Smith Rock is a very special example of tuff. It's extremely hard tuff, which is why you can climb on it. Most tuff on planet Earth is not worth climbing on. Smith Rock's an exception. All right, so we get a lot of tuff, especially in the Bend area. We've got a whole bunch of them. Basalt, this is probably the single most common one. This is what people mean when they say lava rock. It's black. It often has bubbles in it from the gas escaping. This picture is taken at Lava Butte. You can just see it to the top left. It's black lava rock. Sometimes it looks brown. That's just surface weathering. If you can find a fresh exposure of it, you'll see that it's actually black on the inside. This is from Aubrey Butte on COCC's campus. And if you get a really good exposure, you'll actually see it is quite a lovely rock. It can have lots of crystals. These are green olivine crystals and white feldspar crystals, but you don't always see that, and you need a good fresh face. Mostly, if you find a black rock with holes, you know you're dealing with basalt. If you see something that looks like a lava flow, you're dealing with basalt. Okay, third type of rock, cinder. This is what they coat the highways with in the winter. The picture on the right is from Pilot Butte in Bend. That's a cinder cone. So cinder, cinder cone, there's a relationship. The deal with cinder, it's actually chemically identical to basalt. It is made of basalt, but it's super frothy. It's got lots and lots of gas bubbles in it. It underwent this amazing thing called fire fountaining. Think of the video you might have seen from Kilauea in 2018. The eruptions there, those big fire fountains that went flying hundreds of feet into the air. That's gas propelling the eruption. So the lava itself is super frothy, full of gas. So that's cinder, chemically identical to basalt, just way frothier. So if you find cinder, if you find basalt, if you find tuff, you're either standing on a volcano or you're standing near a volcano. So besides the shape of the thing, if you can find volcanic rocks on it, that's a good clue it's a volcano. All right, so I think it's time to understand why we have volcanoes in Oregon. Maybe at this point you've gotten the sense that kind of everything in Oregon is volcanic. I'll tell you what, man, I moved here 2 years ago and I have been astonished at how volcanic Oregon is. This is just, well, let me put it this way. I took this geologic map of Oregon and I decided to highlight the parts that were volcanic. That was a bad idea. I found it was much easier to highlight the parts that are not volcanic. So let's do that. What of Oregon is not volcanic? Well, the Blue Mountains. They're what's called an accreted terrain. Basically something like an island offshore that slammed into North America. So maybe they were volcanoes way deep in their past, but it's been a while and now they're definitely not. So we can safely call them not volcanoes. Turns out that the Klamath Mountains are actually related to the Blue Mountains. They were formed by the same process, these terrains of offshore islands slamming into the coast and accreting. The Coast Range as well is dominantly, but not entirely, non-volcanic. A lot of the Coast Range is marine sediments that have been scraped off the subducting Juan de Fuca plate and squished into the coast of Oregon. Really, the only other things in Oregon that are not volcanic are surface sediments. So really young rocks that have recently been eroded from the mountains and dumped in low-lying places. Basically, the rest of Oregon is volcanic, which is kind of astounding. However, I'm going to focus on the Cascade Volcanoes, which are only some of our volcanoes, because that's the title of the talk. Those are the iconic ones. Those are the ones that you think of when I say the word volcano, the tall, pointy composite cones. The ones that show up in this image as snow-covered. I'll walk you through those real quick. So the big snowy one, that's Mount Rainier. There's Mount Adams. There's Mount Hood. There's Mount Jefferson. There's our three sisters here in Bend. There's Crater Lake. There's Mount Shasta, etc. So let's talk about those. Why the heck do we have the Cascade Volcanoes? And why are they in such a straight line? Straight lines are suspicious to a geologist. So maybe you've heard the story, maybe you haven't. It's the same reason we have earthquakes here. It's all about the Cascadia subduction zone. Let's talk about the Cascadia subduction zone. So top right, we've got a little schematic. Offshore, there is something called the Juan de Fuca Ridge. It's what geologists call a spreading center. There's brand new earth being created there. That earth is moving in opposite directions. Some of it's moving to the east towards North America. We call that the Juan de Fuca plate. So it's a new tectonic plate being created. If you want to see it on the Google Earth image, it's this thing right here. This is the Juan de Fuca plate. And the bizarre border on the left is the Juan de Fuca Ridge, this right here. So Juan de Fuca is moving towards North America. If you can see my little image top right, wherever it is on your screen, you do a little hands of science action. The Juan de Fuca plate runs into the North American plate. It's much more dense, so it goes underneath. That's subduction. Dense oceanic plate goes under buoyant continental plate. Maybe you remember that from something in the past. Here's where your memory might be wrong or you have a misconception. We do not have volcanoes because the Juan de Fuca plate is melting. All right, melting from the Juan de Fuca plate? No. At about 100 kilometers down, the Juan de Fuca plate is nowhere close to hot enough to melt. It's not melting 100 kilometers down, which is approximately where we start to see that Cascades popping up. Instead, there's all this wet sediment on top of it. It's existed as an oceanic plate for some millions of years. Wet sediment has accumulated on top. You can just see it in this image. There's this blue stuff in between. That's our wet sediment. It goes down with the plate. Not all of it. Some of it gets scraped off and becomes the coast range, as we mentioned earlier, but a lot of it goes down. And as it's going down, by the time it gets to about 100 kilometers below the Earth's surface, it's hot enough that the water boils off. Might not be the correct term. It sweats off. The water is liberated. That water is added to the mantle, the stuff on top of it. And as you might know from kitchen chemistry, if you add water to something, you lower the melting temperature. All of this is to say that the reason we have the Cascade volcanoes is the wet stuff subducting with the Juan de Fuca plate is hydrating the mantle and causing it to melt, and that melted mantle, which becomes magma, rises to the surface and explodes as the Cascade volcanoes. So do a little mental imagery here. Here's your subducting Juan de Fuca plate. That's happening along the length of the entire Cascades from Shasta, actually all the way up to Garibaldi in southern British Columbia. That's all because of the subducting Juan de Fuca plate. There are other reasons the rest of Oregon is volcanic. I'm not going to get into those right now. You're welcome to ask me later. All right, so Cascadia subduction zone is the answer for our volcanoes. Let's move along. So, guessing game for you guys. The USGS recently came out with the with a threat assessment of all the volcanoes in the United States and rated 18 of them as highest threat. There's 4 Oregon volcanoes on it. Which ones do you think it is? I'll give you guys a minute to think about that. Which 4 Oregon volcanoes make the top 18? All right, let's see the threat report. By the way, I highly recommend looking this up if you're curious. Just Google USGS Volcanic Threat Assessment. So here they are. Number 1's Kilauea, Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, Redoubt in Alaska, Shasta, and then number 6, Mount Hood. Woohoo! Wait, why am I cheering? This is terrible. Three Sisters, number 7. Oh boy. Newberry, number 13. Man, Portland and Bend are surrounded by active volcanoes. And Crater Lake, number 17. So yeah, we've got volcanoes here and they're a serious threat. We're going to talk about kind of what we can expect from them and what we should and shouldn't be worried about. So that kind of leads to our last question of this talk. Is it going to get volcanic here in Oregon? Are we likely to experience another eruption? Last one was Mount St. Helens in 1980. Notice that that's number 2 on our threat list. Are we going to see one within Oregon? The short answer to that, by the way, is we have no idea. We can't predict the future, but we can say what is likely to happen based on what we've seen from the past. So this is our worst case scenario. Another another Mount Mazama-like eruption. Unlikely to come from Mount Mazama, but one of the things that we've learned as we've reconstructed the history of Mount Mazama is that it was not one tall, pointy volcano. The artist rendition on the left kind of makes it look like it was one tall, pointy volcano. No, a much better mental model for Mount Mazama is, where are we? Sorry, the Three Sisters. Look at the Three Sisters. There's at least 3 distinct tall, pointy volcanoes there, but they're all kind of one large, what a geologist would call edifice, one big volcanic structure. We think that's what Mount Mazama looked like. And that's part of why it was able to have such a large magma chamber that allowed it to go so ballistic. So what I want to emphasize here is 2 things. If this did happen again, this would be serious problems. This is an ash distribution map from the Mount Mazama eruption. It's showing everything more than 1/5 of an inch. 1/5 of an inch is enough to do damage, to strangle crops, to to get into any internal combustion engine and destroy it. And it doesn't take much more than that to start collapsing roofs. Anyone who remembers Mount St. Helens, that was much smaller, and it was a serious problem. I think the eruptive volume for Mount Mazama was 40 to 50 times that of Mount St. Helens. So what I want to say, as I was saying, there's 2 points I want to emphasize. If this did happen, this is a huge problem. It's unlikely to happen. These don't happen very often. The last one was 7,700 years ago. It's a good bet it's going to be thousands of years before the next one. So I'm not that worried about this worst case scenario. What I am worried about is lahars. A lahar is a volcanic mud flow. So as you might recall earlier, I said that our composite cones are very rotten, so to speak, on the inside. They're constantly getting bathed in these hot acidic fluids that rot the rocks from the inside out. And that makes them extremely susceptible to collapses where parts of them just go crashing down. So this is a hazard map made by the USGS for Mount Hood. And what I want to focus your eyes on are the lahars, bottom left, it's the red to yellow. And note how far away from the mountain they go. It goes all the way to Hood River, all the way to Troutdale, all the way to the Deschutes and to the Columbia. So they move really far. They can go tens of kilometers. We have evidence of a catastrophic lahar from Mount Rainier that went all the way to Tacoma. These are the things that could bury and kill entire towns. In the past, they've killed tens of thousands of people in other places. So this is what we're really scared about, are these lahars, and they don't need a volcanic eruption to happen. Sometimes they just happen because these volcanoes collapse on their own. So we're in the process of putting in early warning systems. They've got some good ones around Mount Rainier. I actually don't know the state of them around Mount Hood, but this is where we should be putting our preparation dollars in terms of what do we do about the volcanic hazard. Letting people know that there's a lahar coming so they have a few minutes literally to scramble to safety. Okay, you can ask me more about that later. Let's wrap up here. Oh, so this image is showing Mount Hood again, and that those colors are the hydrothermal alteration. That's our evidence that the volcano is rotting from the inside out. So things to worry about there. It's also why they are terrible for climbing the rock. Yeah, they're great for climbing when they're covered in snow, but they're no fun at all to climb the rest of the time because they're crumbling, literally. All right, so this is what I'm rooting for. I am allowed to root for this because it won't hurt anybody, I promise. So our best case scenario, both in terms of what is likely to happen and what won't really hurt anybody, is basically what happened in Hawaii in 2018 from Kilauea Volcano. We had all this amazing fire fountaining and lava rivers pouring out of them. The reason I think this is a realistic thing to expect here is because we've got so many examples of that here. So this is Belknap Crater again from Mackenzie Pass Highway. What I want you to note, you've got your shield volcano in the background. You've got fresh lava flows with nothing growing on them in the foreground. And what's this? It's an island, it's a forested island. The Hawaiian term for that is kapuka. You can see one in this image from Kilauea. There's one right there. So the fact that we can see that tells us it's very young. And in fact, I believe it's less than 2,000 years old. And we have, I don't want to exaggerate, we have at least a handful of lava flows like this, which came from fire fountaining cinder cones and created these lava rivers that spread over the landscape, at least a handful of them in Oregon. We've got a number in the high Cascades, like around Mackenzie Pass. We also have a number closer to Bend from Newberry Volcano. Lava Butte at Lava Lands is another one of those. That one's 7,000 years old though. Anyways, these are pretty likely, and they will be a spectacular tourist draw. Everybody's gonna come. You can plant yourself a mile away and be totally safe. They light up the night sky. There'll be all sorts of cool, people like me talking about it. I really hope we get one of these. The worst case scenario is like they run over a highway. It's not that big a deal. I'm probably downplaying that somewhat. They could run over someone's home. That would be a big deal for that person. But what I want to emphasize is nobody dies from these things. You walk away from them. Okay, that's what I've got for you folks. Where does that take us? Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much. I have so many questions. We're getting tons of great questions from the audience also. So I'm going to do a really brief, 3-minute update on Oregon Wild public land stuff and how that's related to volcanoes, past, present, future. and other public lands around volcanoes. And then we're going to go ahead and move to Q&A for the rest of the webcast time. So yeah, and people are sending in tons of questions. Thanks in advance. And there is probably going to be room for more. So go ahead and use that little questions bubble on the right-hand side of your screen. And we will get to as many of them as we can. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and switch to my screen here. Screen and monitor 2. Let's see. Can you see it, Hal?
Yes.
You can see the Oregon Wild green with the picture?
Yep.
Awesome. Okay, so Oregon Wild, once again, if you're new to us, we've been around since 1974, and our goal is to protect Oregon's wildlands, wildlife, and waters as an enduring legacy for all Oregonians. And one primary goal of that is just to protect native wildlife and their habitat, which are often public lands and waters. Throughout time, we've been really focused on wilderness protections for public lands around the state, including some volcanoes. So we've got, Mount Hood, which we've worked on several times, Mount McLaughlin, which is up in the right-hand corner, and as well as Mount Thielsen, which is near Crater Lake. We've worked on them historically and even have some active proposals for Crater Lake wilderness right now, as well as some future plans for additional protections around Mount Hood. Many of Oregon's wilderness areas that were protected in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they are all kind of hugging or include Cascade volcanoes. They're some of the most stunning landscapes in the state. And they were also, in a way, some of the less controversial wilderness areas to create. Getting a wilderness area protected isn't easy by any stretch of the mind, but one thing that volcanoes aren't always great at is growing trees. So timber industry, especially during the timber war era, they were less opposed to designating volcanoes and land right around volcanoes as wilderness because they didn't grow big, valuable trees that were great for logging. But there is still a ton of land in Oregon that is worthy of protection, wilderness protection or otherwise. Just because it didn't make it in those bills in the 70s, 80s, and 90s doesn't mean that it's still not ecologically important and worth protection. You can see in this map here, we've got green are some current wilderness areas, and purple are all areas that we believe are ecologically important and worthy of wilderness protections. And you can see that there's still quite a bit of purple all along the Cascade crest here, including, a bunch of roadless area right around Crater Lake National Park. And when we're thinking about, why places deserve protection, something that I love about our mission is it's really broad, right? So we're not just thinking about, does wildlife live there, or is there a beautiful river, is there a beautiful vista? We're also thinking about, what is the value of the habitat? Is it an important place for wildlife to travel, to get to a place where they breed or a place where they hibernate? Are the forests there doing an exceptional job at storing carbon, helping us fight climate change? Is it cleaning our air? Is it cleaning our water? There are lots of things to consider. And as we're doing this, across the whole state, we're really playing the field. So some of it is proactive wilderness protections, so looking to protect additional roadless areas and forests around the flanks of Mount Thielsen and around Crater Lake National Park, or protecting beautiful old growth forests like this one in the Ochocos. We're also looking for opportunities to protect wild and scenic rivers. And there's a lot to see, a lot to protect. Just because it didn't make it through that first pass doesn't mean it's any less worthy. So if any of this is intriguing to you, if you care about public lands, as always, we encourage you to call your senators and ask them to keep public lands, rivers, and wildlife on their radar. I know that their staff are always happy to receive calls not about coronavirus right now, so I encourage you to do that. And if any of the things I mentioned are intriguing to you, go to our website, OregonWild.org, and you can learn more about some of the active campaigns that we're working on right now around protecting wilderness around Mount Thielsen, Crater Lake, the Ochocos, wild and scenic rivers, all kinds of stuff. And consider becoming a member as well. We are a people-powered organization, and so that's how we make things work. So with that, if you have any additional questions for me, feel free to ask them in the questions box, but otherwise, let's go ahead and get to Q&A with Hal. Okay, so let's see here. I've got a whole bunch. I'm gonna maybe just start with the first one here. How old would you say that the Cascade volcanoes are?
Hey, Jamie, could we go back to my screen?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And actually, I have a quick pitch that I wanted to make as well, and then I will tackle those questions. So,
Yeah.
folks, if you learned a lot of cool stuff and you want to learn a lot more, I have good news for you. As Jamie mentioned, I teach a class called Cascade Volcanoes. I'm offering it virtually this summer, the last 2 weeks of August, probably
Oh,
virtually in the fall. And hopefully by next spring, we actually get to go out and do field trips like you see a picture of here. So that is available to you. It's a cool resource, etc. Another thing I just wanted to mention is that if you are curious on your own, the two agencies really responsible for learning about our volcanoes are the Cascades Volcano Observatory, which is part of the USGS, and then Oregon's Geology Department, which is the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries, DOGAMI. So those are our friends when it comes to learning about geology. Alrighty. So Jamie, would you mind repeating that question, please?
yeah. Generally speaking, how old are the Cascade volcanoes?
Oh, good question. So depends how we think about that. We have had subduction of the Juan de Fuca plate and Cascadian volcanism for about 40 million years. However, none of the volcanoes that you see today are anywhere close to that old. The oldest thing you'll see on the landscape today is maybe 1 million years old. And the reason for that is volcanoes don't last. I was earlier alluding to their ability to, or their tendency to be hydrothermally altered, and we saw the glacial erosion. They don't last on this landscape. You've got a volcano maybe for 1 million years or so, it builds itself, it's gone in another million, probably much quicker. So most of our Cascade volcanoes are on the order of tens of thousands of years old to occasionally hundreds of thousands. Some examples, Mount Bachelor, 18,000 to 8,000 years old. Mount Baker up in Washington, about 10,000 to 40,000 years old. And that's like the range that it was building from. I think Mount Hood's still building, Mount St. Helens is still building. I think everything that you see as Mount St. Helens is only like 4,000 years old. Yeah, most of our volcanoes are very young, but we've had volcanism for a good 40 million years old.
Cool. That's a time scale that we don't often think of. Thanks for sharing that answer.
Good luck wrapping your head around it.
Yeah, totally. Here's another great one. How is magma stored underneath Crater Lake or any volcano?
Let's see. So you really got to build a mental model here. So start off somewhere deep below the Earth's surface, let's say 100 kilometers below, and something happens that causes the rock to melt, like that hydrosmelting we talked about with the subduction zone. So now you've got some melted rock surrounded by solid rock. The melted rock is less dense than the solid rock. So because it's less dense, it's slowly going to rise. Now, obviously, it's got rock in the way. This is not an easy process. It might take literally millions of years. But at some point, it rises and rises and rises, and maybe it melts some things out of the way. Maybe it cracks some things out of the way because it's got pushing up with so much force. And at some point, it gets close enough to the surface that we call it a magma chamber. And maybe we see some evidence of it. Maybe there's gas escaping from the volcano. Mount Baker right now has gas coming out of it that's directly coming from magma below it. Maybe there's some cracks in the rock that allow that gas to escape. As far as like how long it's going to sit there, what shape it is, those are questions that we really don't know that well. Sometimes it just sits there forever and cools and nothing happens. Other times it sits there and erupts. We know that South Sister had a magma intrusion about 10 years ago and it just stopped. So there's a body of magma underneath South Sister slowly cooling right now. You inject a fresh body into that, and that's kind of like clicking the, what am I trying to say? That could cause it to erupt. So I don't know if that exactly answers the question, but that gives you some idea of like what these magma chambers are all about.
Totally. And that also answered another question that we got from two different people about the bulge on South Sister and if it was still active. So it sounds like it's not.
Well, it's still there. It's not growing anymore, or if it is, it's like minuscule growth. But there's definitely a big pile of cooling magma underneath South Sister. So that could be reprimed and detonated.
Ooh,
Okay.
okay.
That's what I'm not allowed to root for, by the way. That would be problematic.
Yeah. Nice. Okay. Here's one from Orion, who's in 3rd grade. I think
Cool.
he's here in Bend. He wants to know how deep the vents are on Mount Bachelor and if there is lava down there.
Yeah, so the vents on Mount Bachelor are basically cracks in the rock. I don't know exactly how deep they are, but we're thinking like 5 feet, 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet, not thousands of feet. And there actually is not magma at the bottom. They're hot because the magma that's much, much lower down is heating the rock above it. So hot rock melts snow. They're easy to see because the snow is getting melted and there's hot rock that's heating the air. But there's not actually magma at the bottom of those vents, which is kind of unfortunate. That'd be cool.
That makes me feel a little bit better since I ski over them occasionally.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, there are so many good questions, you guys. I have never seen this many questions in a webcast. Thank you so much. This one, several people have asked in one version or another, will the big one also cause volcanic activity?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. The first thing I'll say right off the bat is there's no good geologic evidence that I'm aware of that links volcanic eruptions to subduction zone earthquakes. So one way of saying that is we have no evidence that that would happen. Two caveats there. One, geology is constantly surprising us. We just don't know that much. Two, what we do know is that earthquakes cause landslides, and a landslide is a volcanic landslide is basically a lahar. So I think what very well could happen when the big one hits is we could see some lahars come flying off of the volcanoes and go down the river valleys and cause a lot of secondary damage after the shaking. So I think that's what's more likely to happen.
Okay, thanks. Here is a good one. So can you talk about why Mount Washington and Three Finger Jack are shield volcanoes and so much more eroded than other volcanoes around them?
I'm not sure there's a connection between the amount of erosion and the fact that they're shield volcanoes. Really, erosion in our part of the world is mostly a function of were you tall enough and are you old enough to have been glaciated? So actually, I'll skip back. Everyone can still see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so let me go to this one. There we go. Black Butte's pretty interesting. It looks really tall, but it's a perfectly symmetrical cone. It has not been glaciated. So if you're low enough in elevation that you don't get glaciated, you retain your shape. So a shield volcano lower in elevation is going to stay looking like a shield volcano. But if you're along the Cascade crest, as Three Finger Jack and Mount Washington are, there's been some big glaciers there multiple times in the last few 100,000 years. So that's just going to scour them to bits. Another example of a shield volcano that hasn't been glacially eroded very much is Mount Bachelor. Bachelor is basically a shield volcano, and it's had very little glaciation on it because, as I mentioned, its age is between 8,000 and 18,000 years old. So it post-dates most of the glacial erosion.
Okay, awesome. This one's come in a variety of different forms, but I think this question kind of summarizes it. If the coast range is mostly scraped sediment, can you explain the big areas of basalt on the coast range?
Yeah.
Or is there volcanic rock on the coast range?
Great question. Two sources. The first one has to do with subduction itself. So oceanic crust is made of basalt. So when subduction happens, sometimes some of that gets scraped off. A better example of that is the Olympic Mountains in Washington. They have enormous amounts of basalt that have been scraped off the subducting plate. I believe some of the Coast Range basalt is also. I might be wrong on that one. I think it is. But there's a second answer to that, which is kind of more like, wow. Columbia River flood basalts. So you've probably heard of those. That's what lines the Columbia River Gorge. I think on this map, all this brown stuff is Columbia River flood basalts. They absolutely coat Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, the Columbia River Gorge. We know they made it out to the ocean. What's really amazing is that they also flowed through the Willamette Valley, through the Coast Range to the coast. one of the things that implies is when they were flowing 15 to 17 million years ago, there was gaps in the Cascades. There was not a big tall Cascade range like there is today. So the lava flows were able to go right through. If you've been to Silver Falls State Park near Salem, those are Columbia River flood basalts. There's no way they could get there today because the Cascades are in the way, but they weren't back then. Furthermore, once they got to the coast, something just unbelievable happened. The coast has lots of wet sand, wet sediment. Basalt, even as flowing lava, is much denser. So it literally burrowed into the wet sediment and went underneath it. So a lot of the famous coastal sea stacks like Ukiah Head and some of those other ones, those are Columbia River flood basalts that have traversed the entire state of Oregon and ended their time by burrowing into soft sediment around them. Just mind-boggling to think about.
Totally. Okay, thank you. Oh, okay. I still got about 35 unanswered questions, so we're gonna have to pick and choose here. Let's see. Where in the Oregon Cascades is there seismic monitoring for lahars or eruptions? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. That's the purview of the Cascade Volcano Observatory. Like that's what their job is. They're like all science agencies, chronically underfunded, and we should have way more. Anyone would agree on that. I don't really know the answer to that question, unfortunately.
People have homework. That's great.
Yeah, head to the CVO website. That's what I would recommend.
Okay, awesome. Oh, this is a question that I was kind of curious about that a few other people have asked. You mentioned that, this talk, we titled it Volcanoes of the Cascades, but you kind of hinted at that there might be a couple other cool volcanoes in Oregon that aren't in the Cascades. Do you have a favorite area or a particular story?
Oh man, that's hard. So I'll give you my background. When I moved to Bend, all I'd heard of was the Cascade Volcanoes. Moved here to teach geology because that's what's famous. That's what everyone has heard of. And what I've found is there's at least 3 distinct tectonic settings in the Central Oregon area that produce 3 totally different types of volcanism. And well, I'll give you the very brief of that. So you've got the subduction zone volcanism, that's the tall Cascades. You've got extension, meaning the earth is pulling apart, creating volcanism, and that happens throughout the basin and range in Southern Oregon. And it also happens in the high Cascades. That's why we get all those shield volcanoes and basalt flows, because actually in the high Cascades, they're pulling apart as well. So we get a bunch of volcanism from that. And then the third major reason that we've got volcanism here is back in the day, we had perhaps the Yellowstone hotspot directly underneath Smith Rock today. Smith Rock was created in a catastrophically enormous eruption that dwarfed Crater Lake by at least 10 times as big, about 29.6 million years ago. So that's a truly extinct volcano, but we think the Yellowstone hotspot has tracked all the way from there. We know it's tracked from Southeast Oregon. Maybe it's tracked from Crooked River, Smith Rock area. So at least 3 major sources of volcanism in Central Oregon alone. And we haven't even talked about the flood basalts. Those are old, they're extinct, but those were volcanoes too.
Cool, thanks. So one person asked, I'm going to combine 2 questions here just to get a little bit more of an answer from you maybe. So someone asked, what are the best parks or visitor centers in Oregon for people to learn more about the Cascade volcanoes? And then I've had several people ask for a little bit more information on Newberry Crater here in Central Oregon. I might recommend Newberry Crater as a great place to learn more. Could you share a little bit about Newberry?
Yeah, so first off, Lava Lands Visitor Center is spectacular. Mm-hmm. You want to learn about Oregon volcanoes, go to Lava Lands, and specifically you'll learn about Newberry. Newberry is bizarre. It doesn't fit in any category. You try to call it a shield volcano, well, it also looks like a composite cone. Basically, its flanks are something like a shield volcano, lots of cinder cones, lots of long run-out lava flows that have totally coated Central Oregon. But it's got a caldera. it had an epic eruption, something like Crater Lake about 74,000 years ago. It erupts catastrophically as well. So it's kind of a hybrid. It does both the big blasts that we associate with things like Crater Lake, and it does, actually, this is really bizarre, but I have a friend calling me from Manila right now. Can I just tell him to call me back in 1 moment?
Sure.
Sorry. Hey, Tin, I'm in the middle of something very important. Can you call back in 10 minutes? Okay, thank you. Yeah, call back in 10. Thanks.
Thanks, Tim.
Life is weird right now. But he's calling from Manila. Anyways, it's a long story.
Great.
So Newberry is basically a hybrid. It's partially Cascade related, it's partially basin and range extension related, and it exhibits a lot of bizarre behaviors as a result.
Cool. Thanks. Here's another one that I am also very curious about. What are the theories regarding influences on the north and south spacing of volcanoes? Basically, why, do you have any idea why they're sitting where they are and why they're spaced out the way they are?
That's a good question. I mean, one of the things that we see is it's not regular. You know, if you look at Central Oregon, they're clustered right on top of each other. You go to Washington and there's 50 miles in between them. I mean, Northern Washington, you've got Mount Baker, Glacier Peak, Mount Rainier, that's it. So it's very clear that something's happening which causes more in some places and less in others. I believe the prevailing hypothesis in terms of Central Oregon is related to that extension that I was talking about earlier. In Central Oregon, the high Cascades are being pulled apart, and that certainly creates more volcanism. So I think I can confidently say that's why we have so many more clustered together in Central Oregon.
Okay. Here is another great one from Liam, age 5. What is your favorite volcano?
Ooh, oh man, that's actually a really hard one.
We stumped him, Liam.
I think if I zoom out, it's Glacier Peak. I did my master's thesis very close to it. It played a big role in what I was looking at there, which was a glacier's history. I've hiked around it, like all the way around it, which was a really cool trip. It's also kind of one of the least appreciated ones because you can't really see it from any of the highways and there's no roads to it. So it's definitely like the cool, hip, about to be discovered volcano. How about that?
I love that. Kind of up and coming.
Totally.
Cool. Chris asks, what causes magma to build up in a specific spot instead of diffusing over a wider area?
Good question. Probably we don't really know. I think it would be related to fractures. So magma's got to move through solid rock. It can either melt its way through, which is pretty hard to do, or it moves through fractures. So it stands to reason if you have an area with more fractures, it's going to move in that direction. Versus if you have an area of solid rock, it's going to be less likely to go up there. So that kind of again takes us to Central Oregon. The high Cascades there, because they're being pulled apart, they have all these little fractures in them. So it's easier for the magma to move up that way.
Okay. Oh, I just moved it to the top here. At kind of a high level, if possible, can you explain how the devices work that measure or monitor volcanic activity?
Yeah, and actually, if you don't mind, let's end on that one. I can give it a good long answer, but let's end on that. So there's basically 3 ways we monitor volcanoes. We monitor earthquakes, we monitor gas emissions, and we monitor what we call tilt or bulge. Basically, is the volcano literally expanding? Earthquakes, we use seismometers. So seismometers measure underground shaking, seismic waves. Those are incredibly sensitive. If you have a lot of them, you put them all around the volcano, then you can precisely triangulate exactly where the magma is moving. I should have explained the reason volcanoes create earthquakes is when that magma moves, it's fracturing rock, and the movement of the fluid actually creates something called, I believe, episodic tremor, harmonic tremor. I forget the name for it. But anyways, we can actually read the magma moving through at depth if we have a lot of seismometers. So that's one way, seismometers. Gas emissions, the old-fashioned way was you walk up to the mouth of the volcano, hold open a bottle, and literally just like take out some air. That's time-intensive and somewhat dangerous. We've developed some spectroscopy methods where basically, I can't really explain this well. The sorts of light that are reflected by different gases can be measured, and you can actually analyze a plume of gas coming off a volcano and say, you know what, that's like 70% hydrogen sulfide, something like that. So we can measure gas emissions, and basically the simple answer for that is the closer the magma is to the surface, the more gas there is, and it'll actually change the type of gas that's coming off. So we can get a pretty good idea of how close the magma is to the surface from the gas emissions. The third way is what I referred to as tilt or bulge. Basically, you put really precise GPS units on the sides of the mountain. This is how they detected South Sister 10 plus years ago, and they'll literally start moving. So imagine you've got your tall, pointy volcano, you inject magma inside it, it's gonna bulge open. This is what happened to Mount St. Helens. We could see it was bulging outwards as the magma was being injected. Think of it as a pimple about to pop. Yeah, right, gross. But that's really easy to detect. With good GPS, you can absolutely measure like to the millimeter level. Oh, it's 1 millimeter bigger today than it was yesterday. More magma inside. So all of those things tell us what's going on with the volcano. And fortunately, we're actually pretty decent at noticing when a volcano is getting ready to erupt and can, take proactive measures as a result.
Okay. Cool. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your volcanic knowledge with us. This was, yeah, the audience clearly loved it, and I really enjoyed it as well. So thanks so much. And someone specifically requested if we could share the link to the online class that you're going to be teaching.
Yeah, send you a link for that.
Okay, so I'll include that in follow-up email. But otherwise, thanks so much, Hal, and thanks to everyone for joining us. We hope you have a great night, and we'll see you next week.
Woo! Thanks, y'all.